Please.
All right, we are live.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues from around the world. Welcome to our very first Sales Enablement Society Global All Hands. For those of you joining us for the very first time, we extend a huge warm welcome. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone can participate in chat. So if you don't see your chat tool, please move your cursor around on your screen, and that should reveal the chat box. I'm Michael Labate, and I'm excited to be your host today. I've been involved in this organization since 2017, and since that time, this community, our far-reaching global cohort, has played an important part of my career success over the past several years. In fact, it's the reason I remain an active volunteer today. Volunteering is at the core of our organization's success. 7,300 members across 55 chapters in 21 countries come together with one mission in mind: to elevate the role of sales enablement in organizations worldwide. So we have an exciting agenda lined up for you today. We're going to hear from we're going to hear a couple of board announcements from Heather Cole and Nicole O'Brien. Heather is Vice President and Research Director of Sales Enablement Strategies at Forrester. Nicole, who is among the first 5 original members of SES in 2016, is Vice President of Marketing, supporting sales enablement at Tyco and Zavari. We'll hear from Walter Pollard and Tamara Schenk about industry trends. Walter is CEO of Brand Fuzion, and Tamara is a sales enablement researcher widely known for her work at CSO Insights. She's also on the board of advisors of the Sales Enablement Society. After that, we're going to hear from Craig Nelson. He's going to share what it takes to build and run a enterprise-wide sales enablement curriculum and sales enablement training organization inside the enterprise. Craig is a VP of Global Training and Enablement at SAP within our Customer Experience division. And we've got a special guest joining us today, Theo Tilney. She'll share sales enablement success stories within her organization. She's going to be introduced by Juliana Stancampiano. She's the CEO of Oxygen, as well as the executive board member and president of the Sales Enablement Society. Finally, before we get started and hand it over, I want to thank our good friend, Walter Pollard, who has since concluded his membership on the executive board. Walter is a founding member since 2017 and has been actively involved in so many groundbreaking initiatives like our annual conference, our sponsorship programs that help keep us operating, and so much more. Huge thanks to you, Walter. And Walter is not going away. He will remain an active member. One other brief announcement: we welcome Bill Ball to the executive board. Bill is the Director of Learning and Development at DSIS and has been actively involved as a board of advisor for the last year. More information on this to follow. So that is our agenda. Let me hand it over to our first speaker, Heather Cole. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So I, recently joined the board of directors, and the reason that I did that is because I am truly passionate about our mission to continue to elevate the role of sales enablement as that strategic function driving both productivity and growth. And it's amazing to me, having been involved in the society for as long as I have, to see what it's become, the largest nonprofit in this space from a global perspective. And recently with the board, we've taken a look at, what are we really doing as an organization and what value proposition do we have for our members? And this is the time for us to really think about that at the beginning of the year. And when we started thinking about that value proposition, the what's in it for me as a member, we came up with 5 core areas, and those areas really centered around what you want to get out of the Sales Enablement Society. And we did that through conversations with members and chapter heads. We did a survey, and we took all of this information, put it together, and said, hey, what do we really need to be focused on? And what we heard from you is that you want to learn what works within the enablement space. What are other people doing, and what is working for them? And how can I learn from others who are doing it well or who have even failed at doing it, and understand how I can do it better without recreating the wheel? The second piece is really to contribute to those industry best practices. If you've done something, if you've learned something along the way, how can you add your voice to that really bucket of knowledge that we need to develop and that is out there? And then, next we're thinking about, and how do you develop that network? How do you find those enablement peers that you can work with and rely on and ask questions of individually? And then the fourth area is really about paying it forward. How do you help and mentor others? And we find that there's folks out there among you that really want to pay it forward, that want to work with others, that want to help individuals and emerging leaders. And then finally, what we all need to do to some degree, which is build our personal brand. And with those 5 critical areas, we realize we need to really create a clear path and an easier way to engage with the society. So those are the types of things that we're focusing on this year as a board. And obviously we have those limited resources that we need to be able to structure around what those needs and the value proposition for you. So, when we think about this, we want to give that clear path. We want to think about the ways in which we can engage all of you in that value and how you can actually contribute. Nicole's going to talk a little bit about some of the areas that we are focusing on, but we also, look at it from the how can I contribute bucket, and we think about it from the perspective of I have a story to tell. I want to help on a project or initiative. I want to start a project or initiative, or I want to lead a local chapter, or I even want to be from a national or global level on committees or on a board level. All of these things need a clear engagement process, and that is some of the things that we are working on for you as members within the next 12 months. I'm going to hand it over to Nicole to talk a little bit about some of the specifics around where we are focusing our resources. Nicole?
Hi, Heather. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Wanted to talk to you really quickly about the 2020 priorities. We did send out a quick little brief about some of the things that we're going to be focusing on, but I wanted to cover them in this call this morning. First and foremost, we're really focused on, your 5, the 5 critical areas of member engagement, and it's all going to be continuing to be about, members at the center of everything that we do. Everything that we are going to do is going to be completely focused around what one needs and what a member, how to help their journey within the society. So we're going to continue to improve our annual conference. That has been like a tribal call for everybody in sales enablement to go to our annual conference. This year it's going to be in Atlanta. You've probably already heard, but we will have a lot of new and sort of modern ways to communicate while we are at the conference. There'll be a lot of different focus areas, and it will all be streamlined into specific tracks, and it'll be even better and bigger than last year. So please gear up and plan on attending that. We are also focused on creating actionable content. Some of this actionable content is this all hands call. So this is the first all hands call that we're having, and based on its success, we will continue to have regular meetings like this, and make sure that you can get updates and know who to go to for if you have questions or if you want to volunteer in certain ways. We're also going to start a newsletter, which should be coming very, very soon. We are just putting final touches on that. That will come out and have links to important information that you'll need in order to engage and learn and volunteer. And we're also going to continue our webinar series. That was very successful. Walter started that last year, and it's been a great success. That's going to continue. So please keep looking for information on those webinars that are coming up. Also, we're going to continue with Stories from the Trenches, our podcast. Juliana had taken it over last year, and this year, Craig Nelson is going to host it for us. And I'm sorry, not Craig Nelson. Paul Butterfield is going to host our Stories from the Trenches. So Paul will be taking that over. So look for those podcasts. There'll be links in the newsletter for it, and they'll also be on our platform. And speaking of our platform, I just want to quickly say that we're going to be working on improvements to that. We really need a new sort of web interface that works with the platform, and that will really help to streamline the engagement, registrations, ways for everybody to communicate, and ways for us to get messages to you all. So we're going to really focus on getting that up to speed so that the content creation will seamlessly be distributed to you all, and it'll be easy for you to get. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Walter now, but I wanted to thank everybody for being on the call, and I'm going to go ahead and let Walter take over with Tamara. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I'm very excited. We're going to jump right in. So there's a lot that we want to cover today. And so I'm really excited, number one, to have Tamara Schenk on today. So Tamara is a sales enablement evangelist, author, analyst, speaker, and an actual SES board of advisor. Today, we're going to talk about the top 5 sales enablement trends for 2020, and also level set through a sound sales enablement foundation. Tamara, great to have you on today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just jump in. As you know, we have a lot to cover over a short period of time. Let's start with trend number 1. I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts regarding to the value messaging and how that really contributes to the sales enablement initiative as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we do that, I just want to put your focus quickly in the center of the slide, which talks about the foundation. So, I mean,
sure.
What I experienced in my practitioner career, what I experienced as an analyst in data year after year is how you run sales enable really makes a huge difference. So the data on this is very consistent. So a formal strategic approach, a charter-based approach, you call it a business plan, it doesn't matter, but something that really connects the dots to the business and sales strategy, to your senior executive, of their goals and their strategic initiatives and the KPIs that matter to them. So that's really very important to have this business view on it. Then we can jump into value messaging.
Right. Makes a lot of sense, of course, to get that buy-in for that sound foundation as you're talking about, and building that charter and getting that actual executive sponsorship, so to speak. Fantastic. Well, let's jump into the first trend, value messaging.
Yeah, value messaging, that's something that really is very important to get it right. So what we see very often in organizations is that value messages are created in the product marketing corner of the house. And then there is actually a disruption when it comes to the messaging salespeople should be using. And for customers, from a customer experience perspective, we create disruptions that are not necessary and that are not really good, because we want to create a good customer experience along the entire customer's path. So sales enablement is in a great role as an orchestrating strategic role and function to make sure that value messaging follows a holistic approach, that value messaging covers the entire customer's path so that it's all created and produced in one go. Of course, marketing has a role in it, customer success, sales, product management, product marketing, all these roles, but it has to be consistent. So that's very important, that there is a smooth approach from marketing messages that then become sales messages, but the essence of the messages, it has to be consistent. And of course, tailor to the buyer roles you approach, to the problems you solve, and tailor to the specific stages of the customer's path.
Fantastic. Let me ask you, please tell me more in regards to, because when I think of value messaging today, really leading from a position of value with the client. Could you expand on that a little bit? Because what we see a lot, I know what we see a lot in the market today is that value parity, where there's just very limited differentiation in the market as a whole, but leading from a position of value instead of product and service, where that can really, and enhance engagement, and your message can really have impact to have, valuable insights and information.
Yeah, that's a great question, Walter. And it comes down to, we really have to be very specific. What is the specific business problem we solve for our customers? So we have this specific business problem, we can focus on getting our messaging really sharp and to have it really precise and also different from what others are doing. So what we see very often, not only in the messaging approach, but also in selling approaches, that we add tons of so-called value on prospects and clients, but if there is no clarity on the problem we actually want to solve, the value is not perceived as such. Yeah, and then we don't drive enough urgency and we run into stalled deals. So really having clarity on what is the problem we're going to solve is one of the cornerstones for an effective value messaging approach.
Right, fantastic. That's great input. So let's move on to the customer path. Please fill us in more where the value behind the customer path and how you really need to take that holistic 360-degree view of the customer and how that really contributes to the sales enablement role as a whole.
Sure. So this is something we could see in the data is becoming more and more important year after year. So that's something you cannot do alone in a sales enablement leadership role. You need to work with customer experience and with marketing and sales operations together to get this right. So what it really means as a guiding principles is you can only be successful in sales if you serve customers how they want to solve problems, how they want to approach this, and how they want to make buying decisions and implement your products and services. So as they are changing their behaviors faster than most sales organizations change their go-to customer and how to sell approach, it's really important to work backwards from this customer path. So of course you can have a few for different business cases, for different selling scenarios you have, but it's not about overloading it and having it too detailed. It's simply to have clarity in what are the big phases and what does it mean for our internal process landscape and for our technology, and then what does it mean for the functions that have to collaborate along those lines. And what we could see is that organizations that really get that right, they have now about 2-digit improvements when it comes to productivity. So it really makes sense to look at that.
Right, right. Let me also ask you, what about, the important piece here, looking at the customer, if we look at the customer holistically, really having empathy for the customer and understanding them. I'd love to get your thoughts behind that.
Yeah, so empathy is a big thing. So it comes down to really understanding where they're at right now, wherever they are along their customer's path. So I mean, there are buyers who have solved the same problem several times. They know exactly what they want, what they don't want, and there are buyers, they are new to the problem they have to solve. So that gives a great opportunity to help them discover the big business impact of the problem and show them different approaches how to solve it in a very tailored, targeted way.
Okay, fantastic. Well, the next trend dovetails right into, it's perfect, driving engagement and really empowerment regarding to the seller engagement, so to speak. And again, we're talking about the customer. How can we drive engagement for the sellers?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at this 3E, engage, equip, empower. So what I've observed in the last couple of years, enablement had always had a strong focus on educating, on equipping, on developing people, but actually didn't look enough at the prerequisite of that, which is engage people first. So it's, imagine you have a hiking group, you want to go from your point of departure to your desired destination. So you want to make sure that your hiking group is engaged and you enjoy the journey to get there. So that it's a lot better for everyone involved. And it's the same with sales forces. And if you look at the data, organizations, we said, yes, our sales force really engaged, they have much better numbers. And you know what the key driver for a high level of engagement really is?
What's that?
It's number 5, sales managers that are inspiring,
Okay.
motivating, and it
Right.
actually coach their sales teams in the right ways. These two are really connected. It's just a question of how you approach it. But those organizations also said, yes, our sales managers are actually really good at that. They're inspiring, motivating, and coaching their salespeople as it should be. That's a really smaller group of organizations, to be honest. But they have to do 2-digit improvements when it comes to win rates and quota attainment. Right. And having that, as I like to say, that emotional commitment, right, to the customer to provide value is so key to that. And that aligns perfectly, as you pointed out, number 5, enabling sales managers first. We're not going to jump to that. We're actually going to go to number 4, though. Using technology wisely. Boy, this is a big topic of discussion, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I have observed more and more that technology is used and more pieces of technology are added to a landscape, and that people have really lost the right understanding of what it is actually technology can help us with. And that goes back to the engagement question. So if we don't have, sales enablement, wherever you start, whatever you do, it's a kind of change management and transformational in nature. So what we also need here, and that's an element of engagement, is we need to define the big why. Why are we doing this? Why do we want to get better in that? Why do we want to engage our customers differently? So why do we need to do this internally first? So when technology plays a big role in this, and really having a solid understanding, how can technology serve us to be better in everything we do? And then also, how do we make sure that we just don't add more and more apps, but that we make sure that they were integrated, they are consistent with each other, and that technology really helps us to achieve the business goals we've set out for ourselves. So, and that means 2 things are here really important. It's integration of enablement technology in a bigger picture, in a CRM picture, and also making sure that the adoption rate is high enough to really move the needle. So adoption rates usually have to be, of course, beyond better than 50%. Ideally, they are better than 75%, which means 75% of the sales force really uses these pieces of technology on a daily basis. And then you really move the needle in terms of productivity. Okay, fantastic. I know we've talked about in the past how important it is at the foundational level before you select the technology. Also developing what is your strategy that's going to align to the technology. And as we've talked about, right? A lot of folks get that shiny object syndrome and lead with technology rather than strategy. And that can cause problems. So even if you start small, if you have that strategy, right, with your goals and objectives, and then align it to the technology, which is going to be most effective and efficient for you. Fantastic. Well, I'm going to jump into number 5. Another big topic today I think is really important in the world of enablement today, enabling your sales managers first. Yeah, so sales managers are, to me, the linchpin in every sales organization. They implement strategies in the field with customers and make sure that the numbers are produced the right way. It's the funnel forecasting thing. And of course, there's the big people component to coach their teams, to manage their teams, and to get this right. And so if we look at sales enablement in an isolated way, and we don't have sales managers engaged and involved in the whole process, we will not move the needle. It's as simple as that. So if sales managers don't coach, or if they coach in a different way, or that goes in a different direction, what they do, we won't drive the change we're looking for. So integrating them first, and even if the first step is only informing them and getting their wisdom in whatever you design, it's a first very important step. And of course, later on, you should help them to become better first-class frontline sales coaches. That moves the needle the best way. So question for you, do the fact that we first need to enable our sales managers for them to effectively enable the sales reps, would you have a little bit of a different approach strategy you would use for the sales managers than you would use for the reps to enable them? I think it's just the level how we have the conversations with them.
Right.
to be a bit different. And also actually, yeah, they need a bit of different approach because they have to know what you're going to do and then also learn how to coach that along those
Right.
lines.
Right. Right. Fantastic. Well, to sum this up, it sounds like these 5 trends, of course, as you outline, are important things to think about for 2020. But again, taking a step back where you started from in this conversation today, Tamara, really having that, build that charter, right? Having that sound foundation to your sales enablement program with the charter, getting the buy-in, getting the sponsorship and adoption, and a strategy that you can drive these different initiatives off of you spoke about today, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. A lot of information in a short period of time, but this was great, packed with information. Well, I appreciate you coming on today.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Very insightful. Okay, so I'm going to pass it back to Michael Labate.
Guys, thank you so much, Tamara. That was wonderful. Thank you, Walter. So our next guest, a good friend of mine, colleague, and has been involved in the Sales Enablement Society for a couple of years now and has been a practitioner for almost 20. His title says it all, so I'll let him introduce himself. Craig Nelson, you're up, my friend. Welcome.
Michael, thanks for the introduction and thanks for all you do to keep the Sales Enablement Society up front and relevant with all of us. So thanks for that. All right, let's look right into it here. One of the things that Michael and I talked about was not just covering some content that pertained to sales enablement, but cover how you make sure that it's highly relevant in your company and you get mind share with your company. It's always great to follow Tamara. I can pick up on some of the details that she just mentioned. It's important to lead if you want to get mind share for true enterprise sales enablement with the business value. Because if you do, enablement and training, which are kind of coming together, it has for the last 5 or 6 years, it ends up being an initiative that's pulled by your consumers, salespeople, partner people, others that are selling on your behalf, right? And that's kind of the end game, right, is making sure that you create something that there's a pull for. Now, one of the things that I like to reference is an old movie, Field of Dreams, where Kevin Costner builds it and they come. And for those of you who have seen the movie, you probably know what I'm talking about, right? Build it and they will come. That's not so much the case with sales enablement. And I love the reference simply because it's one of those initiatives that's critical to the company. You know, the companies, some companies inherently know it, some do not. So how do you create that mind share so that you're not always pushing, whether it be the latest tools or messaging or content, but instead the consumers of all of this enablement are pulling it. Couple points, and I'm not going to focus too much detail in 15 minutes on the 4 critical success factors, but I am going to focus on this. A lot has been said about technology early on especially, and then later on content that went into technology. More needs to be said about the people that run this initiative, and there are groups now in place to do so, and the processes. And I'm going to cover some of the use cases that we've seen over the years. I've had the experience of not just deploying it, sales enablement as an initiative for my own organization, but also deploying it within our clients that were using our sales enablement technology. So I want to make sure to give you all a sense for how do we move the needle as far as that mind share. So from a business standpoint, people inherently get why they're doing this. So Michael, if we can go to the next slide. So a lot here. I'm not going to go through all the details, but what I want to focus on here is how do you get mind share of the consumers of all the content and training and tools and the thing that encompasses sales enablement. One thing I want to pick up on tomorrow from your presentation is I love number 5 and number 6 because it does start with the management team. If the management team get what it is we're producing from the sales enablement organization, then at that point, things go further faster. And what I mean by that is that if they're as passionate as we are on sales enablement, your sales managers, they'll actually make it part of their account and territory reviews, their deal and forecast calls. They'll make it part of their routine. And as I like to say, there's power numbers, right? If you can get the management team on their side, on your side, that's great. So I'm glad that was covered earlier here. Right, so where do these 6 use cases come from? Over a number of years, companies have said of all the various use cases, these are the ones that are most important to us. So I've kind of trended this over time. These are what I refer to as the top 6. the name of the game now is that how do you make these things repeatable? And then secondly, how do you change the perception of the consumer, right? If a salesperson looks at this sales enablement initiative as a content warehouse, we've missed the mark. We need that sales enablement perception to be something very different from that. For example, under staff onboarding. The idea is that sure, you have a week by week, 30, 60 day, 90 day possibly planned to onboard them virtual. You might combine that with an in-person 1 week or maybe 2 week boot camp at corporate. I also recommend to do virtual live weeks, months after. So certainly going to have a staff onboarding, and if you can do it role-based, even better. But the idea that onboarding is something that starts and ends, I want to debunk that theory right now because onboarding never ends. A term that I heard from a client the other day was everboarding, and I really like the term because when you think about it, you're continuing as a company to message out to your sales organization the latest product, be it through an acquisition, be it through organic. There's new things coming, and in some companies, weekly. I have one client that they launched a product a day, which meant that their people were getting new messaging on a very regular basis, certainly. The idea being is that if you think about everboarding, think about what it takes for a rep to not just absorb the information, but more important, make that call, maybe to somebody they sold to in their past, and engage that buyer. You know, what do we do to build that confidence? So I put this under the category of continuous learning and enablement. Those are two very popular use cases. Change the perception. Let your folks know onboarding is a continual thing. We just want to get better and better. Second category here, continuous buyer engagement. And again, change the perception. This isn't going to be some portal somewhere you got to go find. Instead, your goal should be the content, the tools, the process, find the seller in the context of selling. Now, I know there's a lot to put together to make that happen. And I'm not going to go into the details other than at this point to say, if you can do this in one place where salespeople come into one spot in the morning, be it within their mail or CRM or native portal, doesn't matter, but they have one spot to come to find the things that enable them that day. And if you have a taxonomy that's fairly rich, then you can begin to alert them on their mobile devices. You can push content based on the buyer that day. And once you do number 3 here, one of the things that we find is that more selling time, right? Less preparing, less trying to find the latest messaging. Another thing, and number 4 has really been something that's surged over the last couple of years, and that is, let's think of sales enablement as people are selling. In other words, before, during, and after the call. What can we do to enable that seller? And if you can do this in an effective way, in other words, think about a seller sitting in the lobby of the prospective buyer, and they're learning, and they're absorbing content. Not saying that, you know, that's your best case scenario. Certainly we want them to prepare before the day, but let's say they do that. Or post-call, let's say that they're trying to understand a reference that's applicable to that persona, to that vertical, to that particular seller, or I should say buyer that day. Anything we can do, right, to enable what I refer to as lobby learning, you drive adoption to the extent that people are now on this throughout their day. And that's what we want, right? We want people to be absorbing our enablement, our training as they're selling. Now the reason I say that is that if you want to find out where a salesperson is super motivated to learn, catch them when they have an opportunity in front of them that they believe is a quality opportunity. Because at that point, you know, they'll get to it on a Sunday night to be educated and learning and consuming content before the call Monday morning. They'll do it over the weekend. And the reason being is that they're super motivated to learn as they're engaging real buyers. And one of the amiss here is that you can enable them in February and March of this year, but let's say they don't have an opportunity for that particular solution for 2 months, 3 months from today. Guess what? They have to relearn. Hence, anything that we can do to engage that buyer and educate the seller is a big deal. And then finally, continuous learning is something that only is going to happen to a deeper sense when the sales management are involved. And be it the executives that are in control of the country, down to the market unit, maybe that particular territory, you really need to touch them all, because ultimately, if they're doing role plays before and maybe after sales calls, now that sales manager really is an advisor to their folks, And that's what we want, right? It's not just a simple forecast review to review numbers and who you're in contact with. It's to help them understand, the seller that is, how to become an advisor, again, in the context of a deal. And then finally, number 6, whether you start with number 1 or number 6, by the way, these are in random order, really. They just so happen to be up on the screen here, left to right, but know that the more you can track, the more you can retire. And I've seen clients with sales enablement over the years retire 50, 60, 70% of their enablement content in the first 12 months. Now, what does that mean? You can focus on the good stuff, right? And it's all about tracking and understanding what's not the good stuff and retiring it, because from a salesperson's perspective, ask any, more is not more when it comes to content and training. Final thought here, and I've got about 5 minutes left. Use initiatives that cause people to truly see what your enablement initiative is about. One example is, and we've deployed this here at SAP, is white glove onboarding. So instead of putting in front of them this virtual experience, this 1-week boot camp, have somebody connect directly with that new hire. Ask them their background. Ask them how it's going so far. But it's interesting, when you understand their background, you may give them a learning journey that's very different if they're new to selling, new to your vertical, I'm using extreme cases, than somebody who's not new to the vertical, not new to selling. Their learning journey is going to be different. Their enabling experience should be different. So I call it white glove because you're reaching out to that person, you're staying in contact with them. And if you have people on the line with people, it's funny how, logging into the portal becomes a non-issue now. You're on your way. Another thing, regionalize. Sales enablement, for companies that try the one-size-fits-all, doesn't work. If you're an enterprise company doing business globally, anything you can do to reach your regional office with a dashboard that's specific to them, that's good stuff, because then it's meaningful to their market, the customers they sell to, the catalyst, if you will, in their particular industry that they sell into. So regionalize, and finally, build an enablement calendar. Give people a sense for what's coming. Random acts of sales enablement, a term that was coined a number of years ago. I still love it, because if you keep doing things one at a time, guess what? Surprises in the field are not welcome. They want to know what's coming. They want to factor it in their day. Michael, next slide. So I really wanted to hit heavy on those use cases, because again, if you can debunk some of those concepts of what people perceive in the field of training and enablement, you're going to drive better adoption. You're changing the game. Now, if we want to capture the mindset of those that are, in a sense, the sponsors, the investors of sales enablement, use something like this. Now this isn't the end-all, be-all 5 levels. This was built for a client many years ago. The idea and what they wanted to do was they wanted to have a course for the next 24 months where they could take a look at establishing sales enablement and moving from random acts to initial. They wanted it to become repeatable. Repeating success isn't easy in sales. They then wanted to define it, because they knew, and in the old idea, right, is you can't get it better if you don't have a definition that can be analyzed. So if you can define it, at that point, if you can coach and mentor, and then finally analyze it. Haven't seen too many companies at a level 5. In fact, I don't think I've seen one yet, but the dream is still alive. But no, as companies set forth a sales enablement initiative, as you go up the maturity levels here, if you look to the right, those are the things that are going to improve over time. You're going to see the KPIs that you track improve, as in this case here, you mature with enablement. And when companies ask, where these numbers come from, they came from clients, they came from analysts, came from different groups over the years that really paid close attention to the business value. Because again, the more strategic this initiative, the better, and you need executive sponsorship to make that happen. So Michael, final slide here. First of all, thanks everybody for taking the opportunity here, time to listen, kind of go through how to set the mindset for gaining mind share with the consumers, salespeople, partner people, gaining mindset with the executive sponsors who ultimately will, give you the funding, and the investment you need. So I've covered that now. One final point. The Sales Enablement Society local here in Twin City, one of the things that I mentioned to Michael was that we've got a great chapter here, local chapter, and these are some of the chapter topics that we're looking to address in this year. And one of the things that we're finding, and some of the ideas that I've shared today, they're not coming from me all. It's coming from people that we find at these sales enablement chapter meetings, brainstorming on ideas like you see here, alignment, lobby learning, everboarding. Some of these ideas that I've talked about here came from people like you and discussions at the Enablement Society. Our local chapter is a good, healthy one. We meet every month. The session isn't so much a pitch. In fact, we kind of put a guideline right up front that said it needs to be a moderated, informal session. So far, so good. We're now into March. Next on deck is alignment and some of the other things here. But I want to take a minute to share that this is where some of the ideas that I've covered are coming from. Again, companies like yours, people brainstorming on this topic, and working with folks like Tamara and Walter and Michael as well. So a lot there in 15 minutes, Michael. Hopefully I hit the mark, and I'll pass it back to you.
Craig, thank you so much. Craig has been involved, as I say, for just, for a couple of years in this organization. Twin Cities chapter, one of the exemplaries, the meetings that are continually happening, content that's developing as a group, wonderful cohort. We love what you do, Craig, and thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Now I'm going to, let's introduce our next and final speaker, and then we're going to do a wrap up just after that. We have Juliana Stancampiano. Juliana is CEO. She's also an author of Radical Outcomes, one of my favorite books. She's an entrepreneur and she's the, as I say, CEO of Oxygen. Juliana, welcome to the call. Happy to have you joining us today. I know that I think you've been traveling, so thanks for making the time. And yeah, let's see what you have for us.
I am excited to be here and to introduce our next speaker. And after having listened to both Tamara and Craig, which was completely filled with lots of good information in a very short amount of time, I'm excited for our audience and our members to hear from Seal. I met Seal Tilney a few years ago, and prior to the role that she's in now at Grand Rounds. And it's, it's very interesting, as we know our members are very diverse. They come from lots of different backgrounds, and they're also many of them are in very different sized organizations. And it's something that we've been talking a lot about as we head into the conference. And Seal's in a very different sized company than where Craig is coming from. So I think it's great to get these different perspectives on the all hands call. And as I said, Seal has been in the industry for many years. She's got a great amount of information and wealth of knowledge. She comes from that learning background. And then most recently was tapped to join Grand Rounds, which is a fast growing company down in the Bay Area, in order to be their senior director of the GTM Enablement. And I think it's interesting. She's going to tell us about her story of getting started and where do you start when you come in and you're rapid pace, you're doing a lot of hiring, and everybody needs everything now. So I'm going to let Seal take it away and tell us some stories about what she's been learning and doing at Grand Rounds. Seal, welcome to the call.
Thank you, Juliana. And to all the speakers who have come before, I am completely intimidated listening to everything that you've done and thought about and applied, but I'm also really inspired because so much of what we're doing in my very small organization, well, medium small organization, really resonates with, reflects the kinds of themes that you all have called out. So I'm Senior Director of Go-to-Market Enablement at Grand Rounds. Grand Rounds is a digital health 5-year-old startup, 6-year-old startup based in the Bay Area. We've got offices in Lewiston, Maine and in Reno, Nevada. But like most of you, most of the stakeholders that I serve in the go-to-market team are scattered remotely all over the country. So next slide, please. And even though we do different things and some of the challenges that we face as a business are different than the ones that you do, I think what we all have in common is that for my 700-person company with 100 people in sales, customer success, and alliances, there's a certain amount of information they need to get. They need to get it across multiple domains. They have to practice it before trying it out on prospects and customers. They have to get really, really good at talking to and engaging with prospects and customers around the company's critical differentiators. So all of the themes that we've seen so far come into play, even though this is a much smaller organization. So next slide, please. So enablement does that, our go-to-market enablement does that across multiple programs. As with most enablement organizations, we have onboarding. It's available formally, you know, a standard 60 to 90-day program that we run with many, many assignments and activities for people to work in teams. But you know what? The salespeople and customer success people and alliances people have an irritating habit of joining asynchronously. And there's no way I'm going to say to a sales leader, I'm sorry, your person can't start for another month because I'm not going to have enough people for a class. So we also need to be flexible enough to be able to offer it as a one-off. Similarly, we run regular information sessions. We do some event management. We do some communication management, newsletters, product and positioning updates, competitor analyses, all of these things. And all of it has to be supported by a usable infrastructure for how we do things at Grand Rounds and the tools we use to do them. Did I mention that it's just me? I'm not just the Senior Director of Go-to-Market Enablement. I am the Go-to-Market Enablement team. So I'm going to take a wild guess that I'm not the only person on this call facing huge pent-up demand in your organization for the knowledge and the application and the mastery. Huge pent-up demand with very limited resources. And what we've discovered over the 9 months since I joined is that you don't just figure out a way to cope with this situation, you actually make something better out of it. Something better than you would have had if you'd had the luxury of more resources. So I'm going to ask you to skip the next slide and jump to the one after that, and we'll take a look at the 3 ways that this something better, you know, we've taken advantage of limited resources to actually do something better across multiple domains of building enablement programs. Okay, so first of all, a one-person staff makes it pretty easy to justify partnering with experts. I've got to build out 10 certification programs on top of everything else that you've got. Absolutely, I can do that for you if you don't mind that it's going to take 18 months to get them done. Or we could get them done in the next 6 weeks by partnering with people who do this kind of thing for a living. So it's easy to justify partnering with experts when you're resource constrained. And you know what? Those experts are not second best to having your own staff. Often they're going to give you better results than any individual. For one thing, we worked with Oxygen on developing our certifications. And instead of hiring an individual, I got a whole team. I got a whole team of people that's connected more closely to what other organizations are doing. I got a learning partner in the sense that they're constantly learning from what those organizations are doing and bringing that expertise back into the work they do with me. So there's part of me that's saying, I hope I never build a team. I hope I can keep partnering with experts forever. So that was one piece of that strength. The second one was, when it's only you, you have got to rely on your subject matter experts extensively. Now, we get a lot of our content from our product marketing and development teams, and I'll talk about that in a second. When I say subject matter experts, I mean the people actually doing the work in the field, the sales directors, the customer success managers, the alliance consultants. They are the core of taking all of this confusing information that sometimes comes out of other groups and helping us make sure we're prioritizing the things that the market actually cares about. So we might not have done that as much if we had the luxury of resources on the enablement team to work with development and marketing on the content. So a real win around development because we were resource constrained. Next slide, please. So a second advantage of being really resource constrained is that it forces you to focus on what matters most. Application and mastery matters more than information transfer. I mentioned that we use the content that our product marketing and development teams provide. Much of that is wonderful stuff. A lot of it is already market facing, and it's the actual content that salespeople will be using in the field. Some of it's kind of overwhelming and too much detail and doesn't really have the value story encapsulated into 25 words or less, and it can be a lot. That's where our knowledge tests, application instructions, and evaluation rubrics come in to make sure that people are teasing out the critical pieces from what can sometimes be overwhelming content. But we don't build that content. We focus on the tools that will help people make that content work for them. So that's a second advantage we get from having a department of one. And finally, next slide, please. We also have to rely a lot more on participants and their managers. And I think Craig and Tamara both mentioned this. The more I can rely on the participants and their managers to drive utilization of the programs, the more value people are going to perceive in those programs, and the more programs they're going to get through. And that's the third win that we've gotten from working within this constrained model. Peer-driven evaluation and practice, manager-driven evaluation and practice is the key to scaling. So what's on this slide is a sample timeline. So this is, how to tell our value story as we go to market with new offerings this year. The timeline says, okay, you've got information sessions, knowledge tests, a series of increasingly complex application exercises. You've got a final presentation to a hypothetical client. You need to complete all of this certification over the space of a month on top of your regular full-time job trying to close business in our busiest time of year. You try motivating that group. The participants complete this through a combination of they pair up in peer groups, and then regionally there are manager evaluation sessions. So we've got 3 regions. Each region has a customer success, an alliance, and a sales organization. So on any given day, there might be 9 of these evaluation sessions going on, 9 of these application sessions going on, far more than the one-person enablement group could ever support. But more than that, it's so much more meaningful to them, because it's not just, it's not just faster than asking one overworked enablement director to manage it all. It's meaningful to them because it's people who they work with every day, who they know do the job that they do, people who control their comp plans, a lot of reasons why they actually get more value out of it. And we might not have done that. I might have said, let me take all this work off your hands. I know you guys are really busy. I would have meant well, but I would not actually have been giving people the highest value experience. So those are the 3 things we've learned working in a very resource constrained environment. I've had clients in past lives that had 50 people on the enablement team, 75 people on the enablement team. I'm jealous of all of you. But I also think that the value you get by having to work with those constraints really pays off. So thank you very much. Now I'm going to pass it back to Michael, I think.
Thank you very much, Lily and Juliana, for that. That was wonderful. I would like to acknowledge a couple of things as we close our call. As you just heard, if you'd like to also share, and you have a story, and you're a practitioner, you're welcome to submit a request. Reach out to Carolyn Price and Justin Heyman on the team. We'll send out contact information. I think we're in the process of setting up like an online form where you can submit ideas so that we can select the success stories that fit the themes of these calls. Speaking of that, if you enjoyed today's call, join us again. We're going to do this. We're going to try to do this once a quarter. And if we think the cadence should be more frequent, we'll do that. Spread the word. Help others learn. And this, we really wanted to bring the best content available in the industry through these presenters that you saw today. We want to bring that. And we know that the community is much wider. There's a lot of smart people doing really cool things, and we're going to try to bring that into these calls. So do help us spread the word. The other point is get involved. I love what we heard today from Craig Nelson. He is involved. He's a chapter leader in the Twin Cities. He's got 20 to 30 people that come to his meetings, maybe even more. And that's a couple of hours well spent, because the content that comes out of that is extremely informative, very helpful. Get involved in your local chapter. If you don't have one, then start one, right? Be a leader that stands up and says, we need sales enablement practitioners to come together in my city, and I want to do that. That's how this started in 2016 with the original founding members. A couple of people came together in Washington, D.C. I think there was 3 or 4. Nicole O'Brien, our executive board member on the call today, is one of them. And that 3 people turned into 7,300 people in 21 countries, spanning 55 chapters. I think that is a remarkable testament to the power of being a nonprofit organization. We do not retain revenue. We create, we create an environment of learning and sharing through the disciplines and practices that each of us bring to the table. But this is a nonprofit professional organization. I don't know of any other organization entirely focused on elevating the role of sales enablement as a profession in organizations. So that's something to consider if there is no chapter, if there's not a chapter available to you, and if there is, join one. If you'd like to learn where to find a chapter, you can do so on our website. There are some links I'm going to share here. These are the best of the best in terms of learning more about who we are. How do you become a member and get involved? And what are some really good examples of members who have done some remarkable things in the past? And attend an event. We have on September 23rd, our 4th annual conference happening in Atlanta. This is where hundreds of practitioners are going to reconvene to learn, discuss, and share the latest, greatest in sales enablement. We'll also have with us researchers and folks from academia. Of course, there'll be providers, solution providers, to discuss ways to optimize your tech stack. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff at these conferences, and the numbers keep on growing. So if you'd, as I close here, I'd say one thing: if you'd like to become engaged, if you're listening to this call and you're excited and it's motivated you, jump in. There are projects. We have a lot going on, and no one is getting paid to do these jobs. There's a lot of work, and it takes a village, right? So you hear the voices of your local chapter, and you hear voices on the executive board calls, or you hear voices on in our call today. But at the end of the day, there are lots of us, and if you want to volunteer in a deeper level, do reach out. Once again, Carolyn Price and Justin Hyman, I believe they're setting up a form to allow you to communicate that to us. I tell you, just since we have a minute or two left, a couple of years ago in 2017, I became a member. I think it was November. And shortly after, there was a project I was involved in called the Sales Enablement Definition Project. And just to give you an idea, this is where no one is asking you to do something. You've identified an opportunity, right? And so you start to sort of capitalize on the moment. You reach out to folks inside the community. You leverage the mind share of others, and you start to stand up a team. And that 1 or 2 people quickly became 30 to 40 people, and those 40 had the help of 300. And that was a project that lasted about 6 months. And we came together and we sort of voted on a sort of communal understanding of what sales enablement means. And it was never really meant to be something that's, that's end all be all, because there's going to be perspectives that vary. But the idea was we're one community, and that was our reflective voice at that time. That was a wonderful project I was involved in. There's a lot other projects out there. I'm just speaking from personal experience. So get involved, become active, reach out and connect with us on LinkedIn, or reach out to Carolyn Price and Justin Hyman. And that is it, my friends. Thank you very much. We're right at the top of the hour. We appreciate all of your feedback, all of your chat. If we have not responded to questions, we will. Stay tuned in the hours or day that follows. We will send out the minutes of the meeting or our recap with our slides and the recording, and enjoy the rest of your week. Be well. Thank you very much. That concludes our call.